Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. We live in a strange world, the world that has changed topsy-turvy from what it used to be earlier. There was a time when politics, whether domestic or international, was marked by civility, by decency, and by politeness. That was a time when even if you are enemy, you behaved in a manner that showed decency and decorum. I very well remember reading about the Second World War, and Winston Churchill was the war prime minister of England. When he wanted to declare war on Japan, he sent a letter to the King of Japan, His Majesty King Horatio, and he wrote, Your Majesty, and the complete letter. And in the end he wrote, I have the honor to be your most obedient servant, Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of UK. When this letter leaked out, there was a lot of noise. And the people are saying, how can the Prime Minister of an empire, the British Empire, where the sun never sets, write to the king, I am your most obedient servant? And he responded very quietly, very calmly. He says, well, I'm going to kill him, to kill that nation. I'm going to destroy them. And if I'm going to destroy them, why should I lose my own peace of mind and my own decency? When I'm being uncivil and impolite, it shows my lack of upbringing. And I must be polite. So that was a sign of a civilized society. And now today there's an epidemic of calumny, as I call it. Politics is now a culture of lies and insults. In USA, we are seeing it happening, but then if I look at the other countries, none except possibly again Japan, to some extent Thailand, and these are the only countries, possibly the only two come, and then Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries. So barring these 10, 12 countries, I don't see any nation that is having a civilized dialogue anywhere. Look at India. One former president of a national party called the Prime Minister Maut Ka Saudagar, the trader of the death. Today, the leader of the opposition calls the Prime Minister a thief. And the response by another follower is that the leader of the opposition belongs to a family of thieves, the whole family. Why? We seem to be living in an escalating culture of insult, which is weaponized media. Virtually everybody in this culture, at one point or the other, thinks that he or she has been disrespected. As I said earlier, the president of USA is surrounded by the enemies and they heap insults on each other mutually. It's a mutual trade-off. The prime minister doesn't spare the opponents and the opponents don't spare him. Desperately, it seems that the opposite holds true. More and more American leaders are taking up insults as the main method of social relationship. Possibly it does work. And then, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, They insult each other or use unflattering nicknames, tweet in all caps, refuse to apologize for things that once people apologized for. And being politically incorrect, they think that they can circulate false information, call their hometown newspapers, anything, release damaging information about their opponents, and in case they don't find the damaging information, cook up the damaging information and generate controversy to get headlines. An unflattering one, they don't mind it. Possibly it does work. Canada prides itself on its being a real good country. Is it in any way better? No. Canada is today in the culture of lies and insults, dishonesty, treachery to the humanity as a whole. You remember that episode of Federal Immigration Minister Ahmad Hassan and Ontario Minister Lisa McLeod, responsible for immigration, and there was an ugly brawl between them. He called her over to ask why they are not helping Toronto's hefty number of refugees. But he was not willing to take any criticism about the policy. And when she said that the situation was because Prime Minister Trudeau had virtually signaled open borders, Mr. Hassan lost all sense of equity. And he said that Canada doesn't have open borders. Asylum seekers are in a separate queue. They might be irregular, but it's not illegal to have asylum. And naturally, it was a controlled fury, but it was all in bad taste. And Lisa tweeted, Ahmad Hassan called me un-Canadian today. Technically, he did not, but the truth did not matter when you are insulting your opponent, and he was insulting. No, Hussain is the first Somali-born federal cabinet minister, and maybe his culture and upbringing permits him to be insulting. But then, should he have done it? No. The obvious question is, how does this insult culture serve the voters? The underlying behavior issue is not just insulting, but outright lying. Some of our politicians are doing it day in and day out. Now, use of insulting behavior is coupled with ethics and morality. When the Prime Minister of a country and the two ministers are indicted by the Ethics Commissioner for being unethical, how do you expect them to be polite? And you would see that as the election campaign gets underway, an insult here and there would look like a small potato on social media. False information would rule the roost that would become predominant. You know, there's a Canadian broadcaster, very conservative, Charles Adler, and he tweeted recently, arguing for civility on Twitter must be like arguing for celibacy in a brothel. And I 100% agree with him. Today, I look around, whether it's Canada, whether it's USA, whether it's India, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's even good old England or France, I see that impolite, brutal, animalistic behavior being predominant. Culture seems to be that of being uncivilized, uncultured. As a matter of fact, if I did not enjoy some of the insults flying back and forth, and let me tell you, one does enjoy for some time, and then one thinks, are these people fit to be our leaders? But when it happens, it is shocking. I saw a movie. The movie was called The Insult, directed by Ziad, set in Lebanon. There is one character who points out that Middle East is the home of insult. The movie is a riveting court trial that stems from a street-level fight between two men, one Lebanese Christian and the other is a Palestinian refugee. And the heart is one quickly muttered insult that blows out of control and threatens to end in a complete riot. What you said is unacceptable. And this is how the war starts. One character says to another. So we often see this culture. Not to be aware of, not to care about, and besides, not to insult is to be left behind. If one politician doesn't insult the other, he thinks that he is being left behind. Those are the fighting words. Now, the reason for this loss of decency is we have all lost our moral values, as I said, when the Prime Minister, for the first time in the history of Canada, and the two ministers are indicted for unethical practices. When conspirators and allegations are created to besmirch the reputation of the people, then it's something you have to take for granted. And that something is be prepared to be insulted and be prepared to insult others. Secondly, we have always been taught that politeness wins more people. I mean, every religion says be polite, be good, and yet everybody, a majority of people who are religious, at least they claim to be religious, are the most impolite people. This stems from a social behavior. The social behavior is becoming nasty, brutish. And I'm reminded of Thomas Hobbes' statement that man's life is nasty, brutish, and short. And man is becoming into, at least the leaders are, brutish and short-tempered. And they think that by calling each other the murderers, cheats, social and predators, pedophiles, sexual deviants, and whatever comes to your mind. There used to be respect for the leader. That is gone. Could you have ever believed at one time that we would be behaving with the leaders whom we elect? No, that's a paradox. We elect these leaders and then we find that they are not worth the salt. But then we re-elect them. So fault is ultimately ours, that we tolerate the stupidities, the depravities, indecencies, and impolite behavior. But it's an alarming thing. What are we teaching our coming generations? What are we teaching our young people? We are teaching them to be dishonest. We are teaching them to be disrespectful. We are teaching them to be impolite. We are teaching them to be indecent. And we are telling them that being so would make them successful in life. That's a tragedy. Not only we are teaching them wrong things, not only we are creating wrong parameters, but we are in fact encouraging them to be so, because the children learn from the parents and the leaders, and these are the role models, unfortunately. If role models are such, if the mentors are such, what shall mentees be? I sometimes feel that all this so-called progress, all this so-called social relationship is in fact reverting to the old level of animalistic behavior. And we are coming out to be what we really were, animals, devoid of all sense of decency and politeness. We were the yahoos, we are yahoos, and we shall continue to be yahoos. By yahoos, I'm referring to Gulliver's Travels, where animals are better than the human beings are. And sometimes I wonder that the animals must be thinking, these human beings, they think they are the acme of intelligence and progress. Are they really so? They are worse than what we are. The tragedy is that the leaders don't care for them. Really, as civilization increases, culture decreases, and today we are the rock bottom of cultural depravity as shown by our leaders. Shame on them. Thank you.